Hi, everyone. There's still some people joining the room. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you join us today for this 30-minute webinar on financial certainty during uncertain times. We are just so grateful for the Redwoods Leadership Group for partnering with us in this time to talk about this very real and necessary topic of finances and how to manage it and how to handle it during COVID-19 and the different things that we're facing. My name is Jody Seidler, and I work at Elim Fellowship. And Elim is a network of churches and leaders and pastors and ministers and missionaries all over the globe. And our heart is to strengthen the leader, to equip the church to reach the world. And we are thrilled to be partnering with Redwoods Leadership Group today. And Redwoods focuses on growing, lasting leaders. And they do this by helping leaders, teams, and organizations increase their impact in the world today. And so before we jump into our webinar, we want to give John as much time as he can have. I just have a few quick announcements and guidelines for our time today. And so we just ask that during this webinar that you keep your mic muted until the question and answer time. But we would love for you to, if you're thinking and there's questions that come to mind, for you to write them in the chat section, and we will look at them. We'll try to facilitate them as best as possible, so feel free to write them in the chat section. Also, as Elim Fellowship, we just wanted to make you aware of some upcoming webinars and huddles and events that we have for you, which we just love to strengthen the leader especially during this time and in this season. And so we're going to be putting the links in the comment section, in the chat section, that you can sign up for these upcoming webinars and huddles. So the first one that I just want to mention briefly is on Monday, April 20th at 11 a.m. with Pastor Josh Finley. We are doing a 30-minute webinar on virtual communication, just how to communicate virtually during this time using, cameras and all sorts of different things like that. And then the next one we have is a 1-hour huddle on Tuesday, April 21st at 2 p.m. on sexuality in the church, and that's with Gary Ingram. And then finally, what I want to talk about is this Friday, the 17th, we're having a Facebook premiere at 8 p.m. on our Elim Facebook page for the Her Women's Conference. So that's going live at 8 p.m. So we would love to see you at any and all of these events. And really, like I said, our heart as Elim is to equip you as well. And also on Elim Fellowship on this call, we have our finance and administration people as well, Chris Ledline, Aaron Zettel. You guys can give a wave if you see them. So we love to connect with you as well on finances and different things as well. But we're going to jump right in. So I'm going to introduce John Shiffert, and then I'm going to leave it to you, John, and you can take it away and use this time however you would like. So John is a delivery partner with Redwoods Leadership Group, and he leverages 30 years of business experience, including nonprofit and C-suite tenure, to help teams develop and execute vision. From publicly traded firms such as Prudential and Allstate, to mega churches, to small local industries, John is excited to help teams gain clarity and mitigate mission friction through governance and stewardship. And I also found out this fun fact that you run all the finances for the church that Dave Ramsey attends. So we know that you got this and you can help us with all our finances. So go ahead, John, take it away.
Good morning, Jody. That's a nice nugget. Hey, good morning, guys. Happy Easter to you. He is risen. That is our hope. That's why we do what we do. As Jody mentioned, guys, we're going to go through a lot of material in a very short period of time. Just know that every bullet we talk about can take hours and hours if we unpack that. That's why after this, Dave is going to talk to you about an equipping opportunity post this conversation. During our conversation, you can take things to the chat. We'll get to those. So as I sum up today, I would just encourage each of you, if I could find one verse in the Bible, the best I can, to summarize your conversation. This comes from Proverbs chapter 27, verse 23. This is the New Living Translation. It says, know the state of your flocks and put your heart into caring for your herds. There's no question about your hearts to care for your people, but this conversation is about knowing the state of your flocks, not just the sheep, the number of the sheep, et cetera, et cetera. So like the general did last week, I'm going to follow that great lead, and I'm going to break this into 3 sections. And again, I'm going to give you bullet points for each section. You're going to see those in the chat. But the first is going to be pursue prudence, change the model, worship, don't worry. I'll say that again. Pursue prudence, change the model, worship, don't worry. So before we begin, I just humbly ask you, realize that situations evolve on a weekly or even daily basis. Situations are fluid. So we must adjust our expectations and operations accordingly. In other words, during times of uncertainty, strategic development is preferred versus strategic planning. Notice the difference. Plans will change. So we have to create agility in the approach based on the environment we can't control. Less is more. And during times like these, as General Gross mentioned last week, the simpler the plan, the easier for all concerned to understand and execute. So pursue prudence. Let's unpack this a little bit. Very simple. Know the church's checkbook balance weekly. Here's what this means. Understand the organization's revenue, expenses, and cash flow immediately. If you don't know this, everything needs to stop. You need to know that right away. Run weekly cash statements to understand operating gains or losses. Just like your checkbook, keep it simple. Monthly reports are too late as there's not enough time to react to a significant drop in giving. Next one, collaborate. Don't do this process alone. Talk to your team. If you don't do that, you're going to incite fear. You don't mean to, but that's what's going to happen. They're going to assume the worst. Share the why behind the what. Invite feedback so the team can share their concerns. They must be heard, but it doesn't mean you can't move forward. Remember, guys, consensus doesn't work. Any yes, again, these decisions are hard, but any yes is always a no to something else. Sacrifices will be made even if you do nothing. To preserve the future of the organization, adjustments have to be discussed today and executed tomorrow. And whatever you do, there's a saying, measure twice, cut once. I'm saying it again, measure twice, cut once. Third bullet point, reduce operating expenses at least 25%. This is something that I would humbly submit, I encourage, I hope each of you have done already. If you haven't, make these decisions. And when you do it, use a scalpel, not an axe. Use a scalpel, not an axe. Be specific. Most expense reductions that you're going to make should come from the operations section of the operating budget and minimally from the personnel section. We're talking about more in that second. But that includes contractors and part-time staff. Those are naturally going to wane during times like this. Can you engage more volunteers? In the meantime, I'm going to give you some food for thought. Here's a list of event-driven ministry expenses easily reduced from the operating budget right now. Food, coffee, water, snacks, children's curriculum, staff office expenses, furniture, personnel, professional services, conferences, retreats, police, event childcare. You can reduce your janitorial services. You can reduce the carpet cleaning schedule. You can adjust your lawn care schedule. Reduce your waste management services. You can adjust the thermostats and or including turn the power off of the facilities that's not in use. And I'm talking from experience here, guys. Next bullet point, run 3 revenue scenarios. I'm going to slow this down and say this again. Run 3 revenue scenarios. You want to know this right away. Run at a 25% decrease, a 50% decline, and a 75% decline. Let's say that again, a 25% decline, 50% decline, and 75% decline. Why would you do this? You want to determine your operating viability timeline. So you want to get an idea, run these 3 revenue scenarios. Run this timeline considering current reserves, your current benevolence funds, we'll talk about this in a second, and adjust your operating budget plus existing personnel budget. That gives you an idea of how long you have, so to speak. Next one, identify donor designated resources to use first, where appropriate. In other words, you want to determine the order of resources available in priority order. You want to make sure your team understands if they're going to spend money, they want to know where's that source of money coming from. When I mean donor designated, that's very specific, not board designated, but donor designated. And we all know that it's when the donor, they say where they want this check to go. And again, I'm going to clarify, be specific about where appropriate. Some donor designated resources you may not be able to use on personnel. It depends on the spirit of it. Be mindful of that. I'm going to spend some more time on this next one. Understand the benefits of the CARES Act. I would encourage each of you on our website. You can see this document. It's already posted there. Actually, a link specifically to the CARES Act so we can understand. And so I'm going to share my screen with each of you as we unpack this a little bit. And this is a document already on our website. And so look at this CARES Act, and here's why this matters. I've broken this up. We've broken this up into 2 sections for individuals because every one of you individuals, every one of you have individual staff. Just so you're aware of most of the things that are in this CARES Act. The cash payments to individuals, and you can get a breakdown of their tax returns. Did you know that your tax returns, the filing date's been delayed? Insurance coverage, that now all private insurance, all your health insurance covers COVID treatments and vaccines. Did you know that you can defer student loans right now? Retirement plan distributions. There's some facts here. It's, again, a summary of all the things that you can do. Temporary mortgage relief. If you have a federally insured or federally backed loan, you can defer it for a time. Did you know that? This is a resource for you in this time. Here's why else this matters a lot. And I would encourage you, I'm going to say this twice, this is important. Remember, church staff don't qualify for unemployment insurance. That's why you want to consider the Paycheck Provision Program application of this. The Paycheck Protection Program, if you have not filed for it, I would humbly encourage you start that process right away. And here's what this simply means. And here's why we're talking about it. It's a forgivable loan is the point. You're going to essentially submit, you're going to take the maximum loan amount as 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. What does payroll mean? That is your wages. That is your benefits. That is your anything to do with your staff. Wages, salary expenses, payroll taxes. Now, again, a lot of you pay housing allowance. What you have to admit is any salaries, once they hit the $100,000 mark or up, that is omitted. This is all independent contractors. However, what it does not include is the 1099 for professional services. So I'm going to say this again. You're going to apply for a loan. I'm actually going to highlight the application so you guys can see how easy it is on this phone conversation. Again, this will be on our website so you guys can see. It'll pop right up. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Average monthly payroll. You're going to run payroll from 1 January 2019 to 12/31/2019. You can take the average monthly payroll. Again, that is all wages, that's all compensation, that's all benefits, retirement plan, insurance, short and long-term disability, payroll taxes, everything. You're going to subtract those compensations above $100,000. It'll include independent contractors, but it will not include professional services. Keep that in mind. You're going to multiply it by 2.5, and you're going to put a factor in here. You got to count the number of employees. You're going to submit this, and you're going to want to go to your reach out to your lender. You're going to want to go ask your lender, get on the phone and say, who's your small business administrator who can help us file for the Paycheck Protection Program? And again, here's why. If this loan goes for any of these things, payroll, lease, utilities, or lease, it's going to be forgivable. Right now, you're trying to get in some resources for 8 weeks because the whole point about this loan is to keep people working. That's the point. And what they're going to do is they're going to look at the payroll from last year. They're going to compare it to your payroll on 2/15 of this year. And if there's any difference, what you can do is you can add back any amount of money you spend on your leases or your mortgage or utilities, and all that's forgivable. That's why we're talking about this. There's another point to the loan that you're going to hear about. That is essentially the economic injury disaster loan, but that's actually a loan. That's actually debt. You got to pay it back. Yes, it's less than 3%, but it's still debt. And I'm not encouraging you to consider that at the moment. So again, the Paycheck Protection Program is to keep people working. I would encourage you to consider that right away. Change the model. I'm going to talk about the second high point in our process today. Change the model. You're no different. You're no longer a live event business, guys, but you're a digital delivery provider. It's the same gospel, but different delivery method. I'd encourage you got to adapt, guys, or churches won't survive. You got to reach out. And so I'm going to break this down. What does change the model mean specifically? Define your why. Ask yourself, who do you want to reach right now and why? How are you going to reach them? And what do you want to do differently when the doors open again? Is it time to put new wine into a new wineskin? So define your why. Next part, leverage technology. And this is where the two sides of changing your model come in. Leverage the technology in every aspect to replicate ministry to your community. You're going to want to host and encourage more digital gatherings, not less. Embrace the technology of the time. And when you do this, guys, consider your benevolence opportunities by publishing a care at. Again, that's just an example of an email you can use, but care at, name of your church, benevolence at, whatever it is. Publish this care at email and make sure the church is aware how they can both help and or be served at a time like this. Some other high points, especially for the finance folks, ensure online giving is clear as well as highlight the opportunity to support the community benevolence needs. Don't be afraid to ask for money. Just be sure it's stewarded well. Also, especially for your pastors, sometimes you're unaware of the cost to giving efficiency. I'm going to take a second. Checks are usually about 25 cents each. Your ACHs, your automatic clearinghouses, they're typically 30 cents each plus a 0.5%. But your debit and your credit cards, those cost 2% or more. Keep that in mind. So you want to encourage folks, if they're going to make large gifts, write a check if they can. Next point, adjust your staffing based on this new engagement model today without losing sight of tomorrow. In other words, guys, this isn't going to go on forever. You don't want to cut too deep because you're may have to open your doors in a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, something like that. And at some point, can you engage more volunteers? Ask yourself that question. But as you consider adjust staffing based on this new engagement model today without losing sight of tomorrow, let me give you 3 definitions. Let me give you 3 human resource categories. And again, I would encourage you. Guys, we can spend a lot of time on each one of these, but I'm just going to go through these to just whet your appetite to unpack later on in our equipping sessions. First one is salary reduction. For those who are salary exempt and you're considering a pay reduction, be mindful of your Fair Labor Standards Act and your state salary exemption guidelines. Here's give me an example. In the state of New York, salary exempt minimum is $58,500 a year. If you bring somebody below that minimum, what that now means is they are now hourly non-exempt. And so they're going to have to track the hours to make sure they are eligible. And keep in mind, they're eligible for overtime. So you're going to want to have them track their hours to protect yourself with that. Just be very careful. Next category to consider is furloughed employee. Here, what does furloughed employee mean? It's a temporary leave during which no compensation is paid, but still considered an employee to potentially return at a future date and receive benefits during that leave. Last one, and again, I put it last, given the severity of it, layoff. That may or may not include a severance policy based on, so just keep that in mind. So if you have a severance policy, obviously it'll apply. You gotta be mindful of these things. You can typically include benefits, but just mind when you lay somebody off, COBRA is where it picks up. But again, as I mentioned earlier, state unemployment benefits do not pertain to church staff, so keep that in mind. That said, on the document we've got on our website, there are other state and federal opportunities right now, given what's going on. Lastly, as we unpack our time a little bit, worship, don't worry, guys. We got to model this. As leaders, we have to model worship, don't worry. Get more involved with your teams. Get more involved with your congregation, not less. Demonstrate faith, encourage and inspire. Don't withdraw. General Growth talked about this last week. This too will end. Keep that in mind. God is gracious and he's sovereign, and our role is to steward people through the good times and the bad. Final high point before we get into some questions. I know I've gone through a lot of material very quickly. Prepare for tomorrow because this will happen again. Take notes throughout this process, guys. Forgive yourself. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. But take notes throughout this process to learn from it, to apply to next year's calendar, sermon series, and budget. What we want to do through times like this, guys, is create margin. We have folks reconsidering. They like spending more time with their children. We look at times like this and we realize, what is it all about? Create margin in every sense, spiritual, relational, and financial. I'm going to finish with something like this that'll change. I believe it'll change your church. That's a strong statement to make. When you look at next year's budget at 90% or less of the previous year's giving revenue. Let me say that again. Budget at 90% or less of the previous year's giving revenue. Why does giving revenue matter? Where I am, we have 3 types of revenue. Giving revenue, other revenue, that's like camp refund, that's like camp money, music royalties, concessions, things like that. And then there's designated giving. No. You budget less than your giving revenue. That's your tithes and offerings. There's nothing to do with your other revenue. There's nothing to do with your designated giving at all. By doing that, that's going to create margin in your organization. And that's going to help you establish an operating reserve so that next time this happens, you're going to be okay. You're going to have time to think. You're going to have time to measure twice and cut once. It's a lot I've said. Let me go ahead and pause and turn it over to David Gucci. Let's ask some questions.
Yeah, John, good stuff. I'm just looking at a few questions in the chat box that came up, and you guys can continue to add to it. I know Chris had a thought of, he said, I don't think the adjusted federal tax return filing date has affected the state return requirement. Has anyone heard anything else? So John, I don't know if you have any thoughts for that. You're on mute, John.
I knew that. Thank you, David. That's why David does what he does. On the CARE Act overview for churches, there's a document that's on that website. It's actually on the page 2. The person asked that great question. Appreciate that. It's called SBA Faith-Based FAQ. It's a link on that document. And I will actually share my screen briefly so you can see this. Again, it's on the document. This is actually on our website, the Coronavirus CARES Act overview for churches. It talks about what's inside the aid package, individual in business, and this SBA faith-based frequently asked questions, there it is there. And that'll answer your questions. That's a great question. Fire away, David. And so to be very clear, even if you've got never help, that stuff doesn't matter. Any church can apply for this. Any 501c3 can apply for this payment protection. And the reason I'm bringing it up again, it's a forgivable loan if it goes to her payroll, mortgage, utilities, or rent. Good question.
Yeah, John, Kathleen asked, student loans, are they at 0% interest until September?
Yes, great question. Fantastic question. And I'm going to go back to share my screen on that as well, so you guys can see that. Great question. Great question, Kathleen. Keep going, David.
That's all in there currently. I'd be curious, John, can you unpack you talked about ways of giving, you know, and there were some specifics as far as the order that you prioritize them, as far as the most cost-effective forms of giving for churches and nonprofits. Can you break that down a little bit more? I thought that could be helpful.
Yeah, hey, great question, David. Thank you for asking. So there's lots of ways to give, but especially in times like this, you know, when we kicked off this call, one of the first things we got to do is we got to know what your checkbook is. You got to know where your money's going. And times like this certainly force that. And so when we have opportunities to give, we got to understand what that giving efficiency is. So when people give by a check, the good old fashioned, write it in the mail and send it to you, it's 25 cents each is what your bank's probably going to charge you to process that. But if somebody gives you $1,000 online, at least 2.5%, 3% is going to go to that payment gateway before you receive that money. When somebody gives $10,000 or $100,000, that's a lot of money. So again, the least expensive way to give is a check. The next least expensive way to give is ACH. That's an automatic clearinghouse. That's typically, again, 30 cents each plus 0.5% based on your payment gateway fees, and that's the average. And then the most expensive, again, the least is check, middle way is ACH, and then the least efficient or the most expensive way to give is when people give online. When they give your debit or credit card, it's typically 2.5+% is what it's going to cost them to give to you. Just want to keep you in mind aware of that. And give you a point is actually at our church, our senior pastor got up and actually made the congregants aware of it, to how to do that. Because in times like this, when somebody's going to write a large check, just want to make them aware. Great question, David.
No, good. Guys, I would open it up to anyone else. If you either have something that you want to put in the chat box in our remaining couple minutes, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free at this point as well. If there's anything specifically that, you know, would pertain to your kind of team, organization, church, chances are someone else is thinking through it as well. Give that a second. And then John, as those come in and people are thinking through that, my other question for you that could apply collectively is talk through kind of I'm not sure a lot of people know specifically with church staff, employees, that they cannot file for unemployment. And so say it again, what you think is kind of the best kind of options as, you know, in our current scenario, and if things got tougher, what should that pipeline be?
That's a great question, David. Yeah, because, you know, churches, we understand, we look at our paychecks, we pay FICA, which is code for Social Security, but we don't pay FUTA. And all the finance folks on this call know that Federal Unemployment Tax Act, we don't pay unemployment. So we can't go to our state governments and ask for unemployment insurance at a time like this. However, and it will be on the document that's on the website, is there's both state and federal resources for times like this in addition to unemployment, so that you're aware. There's states like New York are actually adding another $600 a week for this time for season. And the reason I'm so familiar with New York is because we have one of our churches up there as well. So unemployment, be just really careful about when you as a church leader make a decision to lay somebody off. I just want you to be aware, measure twice, cut once, be aware of the consequences, what the impact of that person is. So David, we'll find this on the website. It'll be linked on that document that'll allow them to have, there's a lot of federal resources, a lot of state resources where they can pick up the phone and say, hey, where can I find relief in my area? It's a great question.
Good. And then is the Paycheck Protection Program, John, 100% guaranteed forgivable? When Ron asked.
Great question. It is. When I say guaranteed forgivable, let me say this to you. You got to file it by June 30th of this year. Hear that? Great question, Ron. June 30th of this year. And once all loans that are turned in by then and they're supported by the end of the year will be guaranteed by the government. Now, are they guaranteed forgivable? I would humbly submit is when you have to submit all your payroll records, if they find some issue in there, okay, I certainly can't guarantee that. But if it's for payroll with the code and it's actually on that sheet, you can look in the payroll. If it's for wages and compensation and benefits for independent contractors, and it's you've omitted anybody who's been paid $100,000 or more. When I say really, it's the dollar above $100,000 that you're omitting, not anybody who makes $100,000. Period. You remove that. They're saying, yeah, that they're going to forgive this loan. Let me just say to you, our church, by God's grace, we have reserves, but just in case, that's what my team has been doing, and we submitted it 2 weeks ago. The Friday it came out, we submitted our application, and it's already in. So we are certainly hoping that it's forgivable, because we as an organization, we're debt-free by God's grace.
That's great. John, maybe we'll close out with this question. I see one more coming in. Would you recommend using the CARES Act for payroll and forgivable expenses, and then put other funds in an account to pay back when due?
One more time to that fantastic question.
Sure. Would you recommend using the CARES Act for payroll and forgivable expenses, and then putting the other funds in an account to pay back when due? ?
Yeah, I would submit as churches, what we can do is fund accounting, meaning you maybe have one bank account, but you have 10, 15, 30 types of different kinds of money in it. And so if that helps you to put another account and track it, yeah, that's no problem. But again, what you're trying to do is you want to file for this and get these monies from the government. And just for clarity, it may take them a month to get you the money, guys. So you don't want to wait around on this. Get your application in, go to your SBA, go to your bank, ask for the SBA division of your bank, start processing this, get your payroll together, get your quarterly 940s in, get your payroll ready to go and submit it in. And get ready to go. And again, for payroll, for mortgage, if you have a mortgage, for rent and utilities, that's the forgivable portion, David, to this great question. If you use it for other expenses, be careful, because you have to sign that you've only used that money for that. So when you say other expenses, be very, very careful. It can only go for those categories. And so if somebody wants to set aside money on the account to start paying this back, yeah, whatever it is easy for you to do that, hence like an operating reserve. Absolutely. So it's going to be 4% interest rate. If you can't pay it back, it'll be a 4% interest rate over 10 years. So you have a lot of time to do that. Great question.
Great. Well, guys, I want to send it back over to Jody, but I want to hit on what John mentioned real quick with these equipping sessions. And also, I know Chris put a great point in there in the chat box that you guys might want to check out too, as far as some clarity around those exempt from unemployment. So check that out as well. So what we've done is we've put together something that we're piloting, honestly, transparently, just for the Elim community in these equipping sessions, right? And so really how Redwoods started, kind of a 10-second background, is we've got about 25 years of full-time vocational ministry experience amongst our team. And really, we just have a heart for nonprofit leaders, ministry, church staff leaders, volunteer leaders, right? Collectively, we work with a lot of great organizations across industry, military, corporate America, nonprofits, churches of all sizes. And we just thought, hey, if the government is willing to pay a lot of money to train and develop their leaders, why can't we bring that same mindset to the kingdom leadership as well? And so that's really just the backstory impetus for how Redwoods came about. And so what we wanted to do is, truth be told, it's easy to put on some webinars. It's easy to Google some information and find 8 steps towards all the things that we've been talking about. But these equipping sessions are something that we wanted to offer just the Elim community to say, hey, listen, if they're, along the same lines of what John has been talking, there's a lot to unpack. Like he said, everything with what Rich has talked about, obviously anything that's on our website as well. If it would help to have a sounding board and just some implementation for your real-time leadership scenario right now. That's why we came up with this idea for equipping sessions, right? So all that means is you go online, you check out, kind of fill out the form and say, hey, I'd love to have a sounding board, someone outside of my bubble to talk to me about this, right? And I can tell you that there's no like timeshare holdout at the end where we're going to try to sell you on something. There's no strings attached, to that. We're afforded the opportunity to offer that. We've got, I don't know if you can see it right here. There's my Elim certificate right up there, right? We've got 2 EBI grads, Brian and myself, amongst it. We just have a heart for the Elim community. And we thought, hey, if this can be helpful for you, for your teams, for your leaders, to have a 30-minute conversation with somebody on our team to just kind of help you process through some of this more, in addition to the great resources that the Elim community already offers, that was our heart for, right? So feel free to check out the website. Redwood, I think it's in the chat box. Jody put it there. It's redwoodsleader.com/COVID-19. And all that stuff is there for you, as well as the document that John highlighted that he put together personally, just to kind of help you guys out in this area. So thank you again. We love you. We appreciate you. We just want to serve you as best we can. And with that, thanks again, John. And I'll throw it back to Jody. Thanks, Jody.
Yes, thank you so much, John and David, for sharing with us all of your wisdom. It was amazing. The screen share, fantastic. And yeah, I really want to encourage you all to check out their website. If you're on this Zoom call, you will get an email from Redwoods Leadership Group. And so that'll also have the links for you to go. And I would just encourage you to do one of those one-on-one equipping sessions with the Redwoods Leadership Group to talk through this, because they did unpack a lot of information. So I would encourage you to set up a time with them. Also, just really quickly, I wanted to highlight once again the upcoming webinars and huddles we have for you. This Friday is the HerCon women's event being released on Facebook. If you would like to get that in your email so you can watch it whenever you want, we have great speakers there. Feel free to email her, H-E-R, at elimfellowship.org, and we will get you that info so you can watch the HER conference whenever you want to in the comfort of your jammies at your home, which will be fantastic. And then also Monday at 11 a.m. we have the virtual communication webinar, 30 minutes. And then Tuesday the 21st at 2 p.m. we have sexuality in the church. And you can find those links in the chat as well. But really, Redwoods Leadership Group, thank you so much. It's been an honor to partner with you, to collaborate with you. And we're looking forward to continuing to collaborate in the future. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming on this call. And we look forward to seeing you again. Bye.